hanging out with Kenny just a little while ago.
That's
I know
what I heard.
we were breaking down the beautiful game.
The beautiful game. I have talked.
Hang on, Hammer.
All right.
All right, our resident soccer analysts are here with us on a very busy day of the NBA. These two were sitting outside the Golden One Center with Conti watching the World Cup. Our man James Am, our 1320 Kings insider, with us. Of course, the newest members of the Sacramento Kings were introduced to the media today. We'll talk about that, Hammer, but it's been an eventful last hour or so. Ja Morant is headed to Portland. Jonathan Kuminga, for the very first time.
Kuminga watch.
For the very first time in his career, will be a free agent and get to pick a team of his choosing. Devin Carter is no longer a member of the Sacramento Kings. There's a lot going on here, Hammer. Let's start with the Sacramento Kings finances. What does the Devin Carter trade do for the Sacramento Kings books?
Well, I think first and foremost, it does clear up an extra $5.2 million in salary cap space. And that might not seem like a lot, but man, when you're as close as the Kings are to the luxury tax, it could mean the difference between, paying an extra $10 to $15 million in tax versus not. And like for me, like if you got to give up a second round pick, you got to give up a second round pick. I had heard very early on that it was very unlikely that Devin Carter would be back with the Kings, whether it was him going through being part of a trade this offseason or just being waived once it was time to make cuts, that he just really wasn't part of the program here. And I think it's really telling to, number one, exit interviews. Devin Carter was nowhere to be seen and was actually live streaming on Twitch or something. I don't know. During the actual exit interviews. And then number two, like we keep seeing more and more of the roster being put together for the summer league, and Devin Carter's name has not come up once. And so for me, that was another telling, sort of thing that's happening here. But it does, again, if you got him at roughly between 213 and 216 million in dedicated salary for this season, take away DeMar DeRozan's money, that drops you down to roughly 190 to 193 million. This gets you all the way down to 185, 188 million. That's pretty substantial. So you now have a little bit of room before you get to the luxury tax, and with the possibility of maybe doing some more, moves here and there that would sort of tweak that.
Full MLE available for Sacramento?
Once they move off of DeMar DeRozan, I believe the full MLE will be available.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a big deal because the MLE is the most versatile of all the exceptions. It can be up to 4 years, up to, I think, starting salary is a little over 15 million now, and with raises, 5% raises, it can go up to basically a 4 years, $60-something million contract. That's actually a pretty substantial contract now in the NBA. And the MLE, you can also trade a player into the MLE, which is huge.
Okay.
So, James, with the money that they'd be saving, this is one of the things we're, before you got on, we're figuring out how to spend it, who we could go for, what might work.
Money ain't even hit the bank account yet. Yeah, we're trying to figure out how to
Carisha out here. We're young Miami. Spend that spend that $8 million. Do you think the Kings feel the same way? Or would they use that cushion that they have potentially to just kind of sit there, have the cushion, do whatever they need to? Or are they going to potentially go spending in the free agency period or through trade?
Yeah, I think that, you want them to spend and you want them to go out there and be part of this. I do think one of the priorities is going to be like bringing back Precious Achiuwa. Again, haven't got confirmation from inside, but everything I've heard from the outside is that Precious, there's a good chance he'll be back. Outside of that, look at the roster. They still don't have a natural backup point guard, so they're going to have to address that. I just don't think they're done. I don't. They're going to try to continue to shop Domantas Sabonis before they buy out either Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan. They're going to try to trade them. And, I would say the same thing, at least they're going to listen on Malik Monk. They're just trying their best to shed as much salary as possible and become someone who can actually, maybe take in a player, maybe can take on another team's questionable contract and be able to get some sort of asset on the back end. Or, again, if you're going to trade a $5 million player here, there might be a reason why they're doing that. And, again, it's another salary spot. They could have just stretch provisioned Devin Carter, waived him and broke his contract up into 3 years. And that would have been like a really low budget, like I think 1.7 million. But still, this is the path they chose, and maybe they have a way to go and get more second round picks and other stuff down the road too.
Our 1320 Kings insider James Ham here with us, just about 24 and a half hours away from the start of NBA free agency. Some moves made today for the Sacramento Kings. Devin Carter traded to Atlanta. Zach LaVine exercised his $49 million option to play for Sacramento. What does that tell you about what things might look like for Zach LaVine moving forward?
I think it tells you that there wasn't a team out there that was willing to pay him $25 to $30 million a year. And if there was, the team that was willing to do that didn't have a good pathway to make that deal work. So I'm going to guess that, we're going to have a couple of days here where they're assessing what this means for them. But then after that, it's like you got to figure out some way to either move off of him or just like welcome him back in with open arms and just admit that this is going to be a 1-year thing, and hopefully it works out for everybody, but it might not, and see how it goes. I was on with Jesse this morning on the jump, and I made it very clear, like there are two times in which you kind of can buy someone out, in my opinion. And it's right now before you start making all your other moves, when you're giving a player an opportunity to go out in the market and try to shop himself. And so that's one point when you can do it. And you might be able to get some more money back in this situation. And then once you get past the NBA trade deadline, there's going to be a second time where, if he wants to go play for a playoff team, he might come to the Kings and say, hey, is there any way you guys can waive me so I can go play for a playoff team? As long as he's cleared by March 1st, he can go and, go find a new home. But the problem with that is, again, he's not going to give back a whole lot of money. He's actually probably not going to give back any money. And if he does, it'll be like $3 million, and he'll go out and sign a league minimum deal to finish the season somewhere. And to me, that's where I'm at if I'm the Kings. If you can't trade him and you don't think you're going to be able to trade him right now over the next week, then I would try to have a conversation about like a full-fledged buyout and seeing if you can get him to give back, maybe the mid-level exception, that $15 million mark. And that would really free the Kings up, and it would free Zach to go out and find a contract with someone else where he can go sign a multi-year deal and have guaranteed money in addition to whatever money the Kings still owed him this year.
So I got a couple of questions, a couple of scenarios diving into this Zach LaVine situation. Let's start with him being here and being on this roster, and say he's on the roster opening night, and the belief being this was just a money situation. I had to pick it up. We're not feeling each other as organization and as a player. Nothing contentious. It's not personal. I don't want to be here. You don't want me here. We talked last week about sending him home. You don't want to do that. Fine, that's cool. Mm-hmm. Why would he ever come off the bench? Why would he ever take the warm-ups off? Like, why? I'm moving in a completely different direction. You do what you had to do to get your money, but that has nothing to do with what I'm trying to do as an organization and a team. I either have guys that I'm committing to, or I want to see them in this setting. Like, there's literally 0 minutes for you. Why would he ever take the warm-ups off for the Sacramento Kings again, if that's the case?
I think the old saying goes, you don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face. So I say that because, like, again, the NBA, the rule changes, everything. You have to actually win basketball games. And while I think the Kings a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now are going to be better off by playing young players, whether it's Nick Clifford, whether it's Emmanuel Sharp, whoever it might be. I think that they would be better served to develop those players as opposed to having a player who has no interest in being here and you really have no interest in him being here, like Zach. But I do think that at the end of the day, like if you're Doug Christie and you're looking at ways to win basketball games, having a really high end scorer that might be able to take some of the pressure off Darius Acuff is probably not a horrible idea. And that's become one of my great fears here is that the Kings are going to, move on from Domas, move on from DeMar, move on from Zach LaVine. And if they don't bring back a player who can score 15 to 20 points per game on a pretty consistent basis, then every single great defender is going to be defending a rookie point guard, and he's not going to be able to get his shots off at all in Darius Acuff. And it's not because he's not good. It's because he's the focal point of the defense now. You have to have a second, you have to have a third scorer at the NBA level. And maybe DeAndre Hunter in a contract year, maybe Keegan Murray as he's starting his new contract, maybe they step into that role and sort of flourish. But you still need somebody that other teams fear. And the Kings, as of right now, they don't have a lot of those guys, especially if Zach and DeMar are gone.
Can I get a follow-up? Yep. You kind of touched on it, Hammer. Here's the opposite side of that. And I know we've talked a lot about Zach LaVine not being here, maybe not wanting to be here, organization not wanting to be here, the opt-in and how much that costs and all this other stuff. Is there a world where Zach LaVine comes back, plays well, and re-signs here in Sacramento on obviously a smaller deal, more team-friendly deal as far as like his price tag? Because I thought about the same thing that you just mentioned, Hammer. Like, I don't know if it's the worst thing in the world to have another offensive player with Darius Acuff at this point in his career, like that can lighten the load for him. If he goes through one of those rookie nights where it's just rookie life in the NBA, you still got a guy in Zach LaVine that can take some of that pressure off of him and say they had a good year. They felt good about each other. The vibes are up. Maybe I don't know, 3-year, $50 million. I don't know what the number would be, but something that like, can Zach and the Kings find a home for each other? Is there a pathway to that in any form or fashion?
I just don't see it. Again, part of the cool thing about Scott Perry is that while he was not in the NBA, he had a podcast. Part of the bad thing about Scott Perry is when he was not in the NBA, he had a podcast. And so we have this problem that we already know what Scott thinks about Zach LaVine. And let's be honest, like, it doesn't matter how well he plays offensively. Darius Acuff is going to be the guy, and putting two guys in the backcourt together who aren't natural defenders is going to be a problem for the Kings. And so it's one thing if we were talking about, a 1-year deal here where, he could play anywhere from, 12 to 28 minutes per game. I don't know what Zach's going to play. But there's also this thing that, like, eventually you have to put the right support piece next to Acuff in order to have him succeed. And on the offensive end, that's one thing. On the defensive end, like, he's got to have somebody that can handle the tougher guard. And like, for right now, I just don't see that that's who he is. And that's why I've even said, hey, like, I could see a world in which you go big. So, if Domantas Sabonis is still on this roster, start him next to Max Reno, do a double center, and then run, DeAndre Hunter at the small forward and put Keegan Murray at the 2. And that way, you put a 6'8" guy who can shoot the ball, who can play defense and take on a tough guard, tough point guard, or a tough shooting guard, or a tough small forward, whoever it is he's got to guard. Keegan can do that. But now at least you have your point of attack taken care of, whereas of right now they don't. And that's a bit of a concern for me.
1320 Kings insider James Ham with us. Hammer, in that scenario, though, wouldn't Max and Domas be like the other side of the Bam Adebayo, Giannis Antetokounmpo front court, where it's like you have the most lethal defensive front court, in the league, and then you have Max and Domas? Like, and I mean, no knock on either one of them. I like both of those guys, but neither one of them are the best defensively. And I don't know, maybe there's not even a solution there at Four Hammer, but it feels like no scenario we create, at least as it pertains to the defensive side of the ball, is going to really amount to much for this organization as it stands right now.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. And even, when I put that out there, that's something I would at least look at if Domas is still here. I understand that it's not just those two that are defensive liabilities, it's also Acuff. So now you're walking into every game with three guys who have, a moniker as not defensive players. I think Domas is a better defender than people think he is. He certainly holds his ground and, he actually moves in space really well. He's just not a shot blocker. And neither is Max isn't a true natural shot blocker. He also, has a lot of work to do as a defender. I just don't know where you go from here if you're the Kings. And, again, the Zach LaVine thing, we were all just kind of waiting for, and that's going to be the moment where we have some clarity. Now we have the clarity, and it's like, okay, it's bad news. Like, how do you go from here? How do you move forward? So one other thing I want to add is Max Reynaud, I did learn today, according to a source, he will not play in the California Classic. There is hope that he will join the Kings at some point in Las Vegas, but he's currently in France playing for the national team and has a couple of games that coincide with the California Classic, and he's not going to be able to make it back in time, which is good for him because he needs to be part of that French national team that, so he's playing really high level summer ball here in the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's good for Max. Hopefully we see him in Vegas at some point. If he gets to Vegas, I don't even know if he'd play.
Those guys seemed hyped about Summer League and the California Classic today.
Yeah, they that's the same vibe I got, man. They want to go out there and
win.
Yeah,
as they say, they want to go out there and win.
Go out there and win for sure, man. So got the Kings, the Zach LaVine situation, and the DeMar DeRozan situation. We were talking for maybe longer than we should have about Jonathan Kuminga and Precious Achiuwa.
Kuminga watch.
There we go. And who you would rather have. And even with me making an argument for Jonathan Kuminga, that doesn't mean that's what I want to do. I'm just thinking about it. Is there a pathway? We know there's interest, but is there a pathway for them to be able to sign a guy like Jonathan Kuminga? And even in a crazier scenario, is there a pathway for them to do that and be able to retain Precious Achiuwa?
Yeah, I think there is a pathway. I mean, it would just be, what does Atlanta want in a sign and trade? Because Atlanta, I don't know that they hold all the cards here, but it's either they do a sign and trade and help him get a bigger contract, or the flip side would be that you try to get him on a mid-level exception. And the problem is the Kings need to get well below the cap in order to get that mid-level exception. And I'm not sure that Kuminga thinks he's a mid-level guy, and that's going to be a problem too. I've said this a bunch of times, and I'll keep saying it. I don't really get the infatuation with the Kings and Jonathan Kuminga outside of he's a young player with potential. But he's also a young player that's been in the league for a long time, and it's not going to be like an easy, he fits in and he's averaging a bunch of points and you're winning. So I'm not sure how I would handle that situation if I were the Kings. I think it does tell you a little bit about, number one, Atlanta being someone who is moving in a bunch of different directions at one time, but also that, they weren't 100% sold on him either.
Well, here's the other thing, Hammer. Jonathan Kuminga can think whatever he wants to about his value. And I wish the brother the best, but the league will determine what his value is. And we're going to find out probably for the first time exactly what it is. I don't blame teams for not running the Golden State and wanting to trade an arm and a leg for whatever Mike Dunleavy Jr. told him to do. I have no problem with teams going like, nah, we'll wait. Let's play this out. Atlanta decides, let's see what this winds up looking like. They go with it. And now the league will tell us exactly what Jonathan Kuminga is worth. And it might not be what Jonathan Kuminga thinks he's worth.
Yeah, I just want to clear something up too. I keep seeing a bunch of people like he's unrestricted, that all that stuff. Um, that doesn't mean that the Hawks can't sign and trade him. Like, they still own his Larry Bird rights. So while yes, he's unrestricted, he would have been in the same situation Zach LaVine is in today if he would have opted out. And so, yeah, they could still they could still trade him. And the reason why you would do that is because there might not be another team out there with a whole bunch of cap space that's willing to use it on Jonathan Kaminga. Now, it's
Mhm.
possible that the mid level is the only thing he gets, but again, if you're a team like the Kings, and again, just hypothetically speaking, if they called and said, "Hey, um, how about, we trade you Kaminga in a sign and trade for Malik Monk?" And, again, where the Warriors wouldn't take that deal, maybe the Hawks would,
Mm.
but maybe they wouldn't as well. I'm just throwing out a hypothetical, but all of a sudden you're able to trade one of your contracts for a contract, as opposed to trying to sign him as a free agent and saying, "Hey, the absolute best we can do is a mid-level exception. If that's not enough for you, then good luck."
Is
So
it crazy to think that that's not likely given the fact that Atlanta and Sacramento just did business today and they have probably discussed something? I'm sure there was a conversation regarding Jonathan Kaminga, and they still chose to move forward with business the way that they did regarding Devin Carter.
well, remember always that there are reasons why you do things at certain times. So again, let's just say the Kings are at like 213 million in salary cap and the first apron is at 208.5 or something. I'm not sure the exact number, but if
Mhm.
somehow you just drop below the first apron, it now allows you to do more things than you could when you're above the first apron. So there could be a reason very specifically why the Kings made that move today, before the new year starts, because remember, the new calendar year in the NBA starts July 1st. So by moving him now, there's a possibility that they again moved into just a different category of team when it comes to the actual salary cap. I'd have to look at it.
Mm.
But I'm going to guess that it puts them very, very close to outside of the first apron. And again, if you're above the first apron, I don't think you can do sign and trades. And there's a couple other things you can't do if you're above the first apron. And that might be why they did this move, like as we're talking.
I see.
You know, I guess a little bit of an argument for Jonathan Kaminga and people not sure about who he is and what he could be in this league. Just looking at some of the stuff after he got traded to Atlanta, when he got the shot attempts, he produced at least on the points column in the box score. A lot of the times when it was him, scoring 6 points, 7 points, 9 points, it's because he's only getting five shot attempts or anything. When his shot attempts were in the double digits, very rarely did he not score around 15, 16 points. And these were in wins too. It wasn't meaningless games or anything else like that. The two games that they beat the Knicks in that first round series, he had 21 points in game three, 19 points in game two, 14 shot attempts in game three, 12 shot attempts in game two, and never really sniffed that again in that series. So I wonder if I say all that talking about the Kings, saying I wonder if the Kings look at him, Scott Perry, BJ Armstrong, and Jonathan Kaminga himself says, "Hey, look, I get an opportunity to get consistent shot attempts and get consistent looks on the offensive end, and I'd like to see him rebound a little bit more. But I wonder if they look at it like, hey, when he's given the opportunity to score, he actually comes through with that, and maybe that's why they're kind of interested in him the way they are."
Yeah, I mean, I do think like BJ Armstrong is one of the driving forces behind the Jonathan Kaminga like hunt. And like he does like see the athleticism, the ability to score, the potential defensive stuff and all that. But like at some point, like you're 6 years into your career, like at what point do we say that that's not, it doesn't really matter, or 5 years in? Like what you think you can be and all that stuff, that's nice, but I actually need you to be something. and whatever that is, he has not become wherever he's at, and that's tough.
Would
So
we say the same thing about Keegan Murray?
yeah, I mean, I guess maybe you could say the same thing about Keegan Murray, except for I think we all know what Keegan is. We're just not very happy with the fact that that's what he ended up being. I
Fair,
mean, like to
fair
be
enough.
honest,
No, that's perfectly fair.
yeah, because I think Keegan Murray is an excellent 3-and-D defender, except for the fact that his three-point shot hasn't been great the last 2 years, but, I still think he's a top-tier defender, and so I kinda actually know who Keegan Murray is. I just hope that the offensive side, there's some awakening, and all of a sudden he jumps to 18 points per game. I just I'm with you, we don't know if that's ever gonna happen, but I would rather have a guy who at least figured out how to get himself on the court for 38 minutes a game because he plays defense, which is Keegan, versus Kaminga, who is, working from behind the whole time, who's trying to, avoid coming off the bench, or he is playing off the bench and he's not getting enough minutes. And it's just a tough place to be in.
James Ham with us here, our 1320 Kings Insider, host of the Locked On Kings podcast. The marathon continues. It's 60 minutes of commercial-free sports talk with Dylan and Casey on KIFM West Sacramento, KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, ESPN 1320, live on the Odyssey app, live on the iHeart app. You can watch the show on twitch.tv/ESPN 1320, youtube.com/ESPN 1320, and if you're scrolling your timelines, at ESPN 1320 on Twitter as well, wherever you are. We appreciate you so much for being with us, James. We appreciate you for being with us, as you've already had a busy morning as the newest members of the Sacramento Kings were introduced today by General Manager Scott Perry. It sounds like I don't know if you guys caught up on this. Of course, James and Kenny were both there today. I don't know if you guys caught on to this. I feel like there are already buzzwords associated with the season, and the first one that caught my attention, I think it was Darius that pointed it out, was conditioning. He brought up conditioning in Scott Perry, and then I think conditioning came up several times after that.
Yeah, I feel for these guys. This is going to be a long training camp. It's going to be a long off season where they're really trying to get these guys in tip-top shape. I personally think it is the best way to run a young team. Like, if you're going to have a young team, then try to run everybody else off the court. Like, go back to the 2018 Kings team under Dave Yeager that was so incredibly effective. And they're effective because they didn't know what they didn't know, but what they did know is that they could run and outrun everybody else in the league, which is what they did for the most part. And it led to 39 wins, which was, like, in all honesty, that was the highest win total in the first 15 years I covered the team, something like that, 14 years. So 39 wins is a lot more than any of the other coaches before him had gotten, and even George Karl. I think that that's the pathway forward. Watching Darius Acuff at the college level, he's running downhill the entire time. He is putting pressure on the defense the entire time. I love his forward lean and the fact that he looks like an NFL running back half the time trying to get to the basket. And I think that that's where you need to push this team as a major, major transition team that can, get up and down the court. And you're not going to be a great defensive team, but you'll mask some of that by, again, getting the ball out of the basket quick and just flying back to the other end.
I was having visions of him in that arena doing what he does, man, getting up and down the court and finding different guys, different lob threats, Dylan Cardwell, even when the Kuminga stuff, man, get him out in the open court with Jonathan Kuminga and Darius Acuff and what that might look like. But you got a chance to finally kind of talk to these guys, all three of the guys that were drafted by the Kings today after the press conference. Early thoughts about just kind of talking to them and getting a feel for who they are as young men and players.
Yeah, I think they're all, like, very engaging. I think right off the bat, the thing that stood out to me was that Darius Acuff was a little shy. And I don't think that that's the player that we see on the court. Is just who he is right now with media as he's getting comfortable. I also thought it was kind of cool to see how it was hitting them right then. Like, while they stood up and held their jerseys up and then sat back down, and next thing you know, they're fielding questions from the media. that was the moment where all three of them were like, "Oh my gosh, we're in the NBA, and oh my gosh, we play basketball games in 6 days, 5 days, whatever it is." So,
Great question
um,
by Kenny Caraway there.
Just do what I
yeah.
can.
Yeah, I do think that there was a little bit of like overwhelmed moment, and also that like Acuff is a quiet kid. He is. Again, like we always hear about like this alpha male mentality. He certainly doesn't portray that as just like a regular human. Like when he gets on the court, though, I think it is like a no prisoner thing, and I'm intrigued to see sort of the dichotomy of who he is off the court and on the court. But yeah, interesting dude. And I thought, Alex Caravan, like right away, the way he talks reminded me a lot of Costa Koufis. Like that dude ain't gonna say anything negative about anybody anytime soon. And it's just very there's some cliches in there, but a good guy and somebody who has an idea of how he's going to transition to the league. He thinks he can play any position. I asked him that specifically. And again, Emmanuel Sharp, he's a player who, is very hopeful to play in the NBA. Our friend Sean Cunningham put it out there that looks like he's getting a full contract, which again he's not getting a two-way contract, but he's probably getting that second round exception contract, which will probably be a two-year deal with a third-year team option.
In the latest example, and I want to expand on some of that here in just a second, Hammer, but in the latest example of I don't understand basketball, free agent sharpshooter Kevin Huerter intends to sign a 3-year, $27 million deal to return to the Detroit Pistons, sources tell Shams Charania and ESPN. My elementary school math has been pretty solid as of late. $27 million over the course of 3 years, 9 per year. Really? That's the going rate for Kevin Huerter?
Ouch.
Wow. Hey, salute. That man averaged 10 points per game last year. That sharpshooter label should have died probably at that All-Star game.
Well, technically.
Hey, watch more games, D-Lo, because I do not understand. I can't help but think what an indictment all of this is on Zach LaVine. Not that Zach LaVine would sign a 3-year, $27 million deal right now. There would be the money we're talking about is $3. I don't know what the breaking point was for like Rich Paul and Zach LaVine. Was it $390 or no starter? Like we're not having a conversation. Was it $375? Like what was the number that they got to her? It's like, yeah, we're not doing this. We're just going to take the 49. I just cannot believe him. There's not a market for him.
That's crazy.
There isn't a market for him.
I think I made this comparison with you guys. The shooting guard at the NBA level is feeling more and more like the running back at the NFL level, where people just look at him as replacements, as replaceable pieces. And look, again, if you did the 11 pre-draft workouts that I did, 10, 11, whatever it was, you saw very quickly that like half the players coming through are between 6'2" and 6'6" shooting guards. That's basically the G League in a nutshell. It's an entire league of shooting guards. And so like, I do think that there's less value. Like I don't want to like throw it out there in the world, but like what would be the difference between bringing in Cam Thomas on a league minimum deal, trying to make good contract, and having Zach LaVine play? I don't think there's any difference. Like they're basically what's that?
I think Zach is better. I understand what you're saying in terms of like the score and not much else to offer, but I do feel like Zach LaVine's a better basketball.
Well, yeah, but he's better at $44 million or $46 million more than a league minimum deal. He's not $46 million better.
Sure.
He might be $8 million better.
Well, see, and that's the part that I keep getting hung up on. No team, like, because I was convinced someone will sign him at a lower contract, like a lower contract where it's like, no, Zach LaVine is a good NBA player. He still makes good NBA money. Now, like, I'm just hung up on Zach LaVine's days of making like NBA money are over.
Oh yeah. No,
Like
I think
those
so
big
too.
contracts are gone.
Which in my opinion is just dumb. And it's just dumb by the people who run these organizations.
I don't think it's dumb. I think it's dumb by a couple of organizations.
Uh,
I think he can help someone,
I think he can
particularly
too.
Detroit, a lot more than Kevin Herter can.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. They're gonna give Kevin Herter $9 million a year, and we just watched you. We just watched you not be able to score to save your life, and your season is done because of that.
Yeah.
It's done. It's not like, oh, team building, all this other stuff. No, you're going home because you could barely score against. You needed an epic failure in Game 6 against Orlando to advance in that series, and then you got sent home by a Cavs team who was just non-competitive whatsoever the very next round against a real team like the Knicks. We saw the Hawks, who good thing they got rid of Trae Young, and he just a scorer that can't do nothing else, put up 30 points in a winner-go-home game against the Knicks. Like, we just saw this in the playoffs where you need top-flight scoring. And the thought that it's just replaceable and we can fill this up around the margins, these teams are going to go home every spring because of this, with this type of thought. We'll just get a Herter and we'll Duncan Robinson and we'll just shoot our way into contention. And when the real teams come out in the playoffs, you guys can't put up more than 45 points in a half. We just watched this.
It's tough, Kenny. I agree with you because I feel like, I always say this. It doesn't matter how good someone is as a defender. If they can't get off the bench, they're not defending anybody. It kind of feels like as soon as things got tough for Detroit, they tightened their rotation, and the players that fell out of the rotation very quickly were the guys who shot the ball. So again, if you're not good enough to be on the court, it doesn't matter how well you shoot the three. You got to be able to be out there for, when playing both sides of the ball and when it matters. And I think, again, look at Detroit, like their closing lineup is a bunch of non-shooters for the most part. And that's tough. So, because in a closing lineup, you're going to play that closing lineup like 75, 80% of the time when you're in the playoffs.
I agree with everything you just said. I just don't agree with the Atlanta example. I think the Detroit example works. I think you have to have a very specific team around him. Like, Atlanta doesn't have that person yet. If you trade for Zach LaVine or you sign Zach LaVine or however, like, the mechanics work, Zach LaVine can come in and look around and go, I'm the one. You walk into Detroit, right away, I have a role here. I have a specific role here. And his role in Detroit, I think, would be very high. You walk into San Antonio, same thing. I have a role here. It's a very specific role. I don't think you could just throw him on a team that needs scoring like Atlanta. I think you can throw him on a team that needs scoring, multi-layered scoring like Detroit, where, I not literally. I answer to him. That's the guy right there. That's the MVP candidate right there. I feel like we joke. I mean, they've got their own issues. It makes sense in Boston, believe it or not. Like, it would absolutely make sense, but it comes with a version of Kevin Herter that we've never. It comes with a version of Zach LaVine that we've never seen before, and it's like in Minnesota, in Chicago, and in Sacramento, you were asked to do something. We're not asking you to do that. Go be that multi-layered scorer you are, and that's it. You don't have to do any. You don't have to carry this team. You don't have to do none of that. Just go be the multi-layered scorer you are, and you'll be fine. And I get teams' hesitancy to it because, again, Minnesota, Chicago, Sacramento, we've never seen it. We're asking someone who is double-digit years into his career to do something he's never been asked to do. And, again, I get the hesitancy to it. But for teams that are so desperate to win, when you look at the Knicks and the way that they were, I just don't know how someone didn't pounce on this. And maybe they tried, I don't know. Maybe they did. And the dollar figure, maybe the dollar figure just didn't work. And he's like, I'm going to get paid at all costs. But if that's the case, I believe Rich Paul's too smart for that. Yeah. I absolutely believe he's too smart for that. And in the end, these guys are going to lose out big, in my opinion, next year.
I would have said, hey, we got 3 years, 60, 3 years, 75. 2 years, 50 for you to come here in Detroit, as opposed to running back Kevin Herter for $9 million a year. Like, that's a waste of time. If you do that and try to bring Tobias Harris back, we already know how this story is going to end for Detroit. And teams in the East got better. Miami got better.
Yeah.
The Knicks are the champs now.
Yeah.
Like, that's not – you ain't going to keep up that way. And it's – free agency hasn't even started. So maybe they got something up their sleeve.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's – if I was in Detroit, I wouldn't be excited about that.
I'd also point out, too, that Detroit, by signing Kevin Herter to a 3-year, $27 million deal, they may have made Duncan Robinson expendable at much more than that, at like 15, 16, 17 million. Duncan's got a really weird contract where I think this year only $2 million is guaranteed and next year none of it is guaranteed. So again, we want
an NFL contract.
Yeah, he did. So we want to initially like jump to the conclusion that this means that, that they're choosing this path, but it might not be that path. It might be that they've got a deal for Duncan Robinson to go somewhere else and they're bringing in one of those players, but they wanted to make sure that they had a Duncan Robinson facsimile to throw out there at least for, 15 to 18 minutes a game. And that just happened to be Kevin Herter.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right, Ham.
James Ham with us here, 1320 Kings Insider. Hammer, what do you think Scott Perry's day is like tomorrow?
Chaos. No,
So?
I mean, I think today's going to be chaos. I think tomorrow's going to be chaos. I think they've got a bunch of, they're trying to work out deals. Whether or not they can is going to be a big question. But, free agency doesn't just mean free agency anymore. And to be honest with you, free agency is almost dead. Like the league is it's called like league sponsored, like putting down free agency. It's not even that functional at this point. It's, guys are all signing today back with their former teams they can't actually sign until July 6th, but we're at least hearing about the deals that they have in place. But I think the league has done a disservice to free agency, and the Aprons the league is doing some really crazy stuff that's going to constrict very quietly free agency and constrict drafts. And then, it's going to come down to trades. And that's why we're seeing all these sign-in trades and why we're seeing teams do sneaky moves like picking up a $10 million deal for Buddy Hield. So they had a $10 million player to trade. I told you guys this, if they would have never traded Kevin Herter, they would have had Jonathan Kuminga last year before the season started. If they would have had the $18 million expiring contract, the Golden State Warriors would have traded him for a protected first down the road. The same would have happened if the Kings would have, instead of involving the Bulls, if they would have just taken back Zach Collins and, Keldon Johnson, they would have had the $18 million expiring contract that would have got them Kuminga in Zach Collins. But this is kind of like a weird path that they were trying to tiptoe, and it did not work out.
I know last year he wasn't here, but you talk about the deal with Chicago, obviously the De'Aaron Fox deal. It brings us back to closing the book. Domantas Sabonis is still, but closing the book on the era of Monty McNair and Wes Wilcox. And they gave us a hell of a goodbye today with moving on from Devin Carter, adding a second-round pick to – I was thinking about this.
Did your boy Wes text you? Ha-ha, gotcha.
Wes would probably say, it's not my hands.
No.
It's not on me. That's probably what he would say. Thoughts on 80, though, right by Scandia, leaving the Golden One Center.
Kim Piffany's.
Yeah, I was like, man, is Devin Carter the worst lottery pick? And no, he's not. Stauskas is still around. He still was better than Jimmer, better than Thomas Robinson. So he wasn't the worst, but damn, it was bad. That was a bad lottery pick, Devin Carter. And now he's gone, and you had to send out a second rounder to go with it, man. So that was tough.
Dang, man. Papa Giannis popped into my head too.
Wow.
Man, between Thomas Robinson and Papa Giannis and Stauskas,
what was the tweet? Lord, give me strength. What was it?
Lord, give me strength.
Lord, give me strength.
The best thing about Nick Stauskas was that the little closed captioning called him Sauce Castillo, and he had a cool, funny nickname. That was the
Nick
only good thing
Stauskas,
about Nick Stauskas.
he had a 30-point game on national TV one time with the Blazers.
There's a legendary War Room video that will live forever.
Damn.
Because of
tough.
Nick Stauskas.
Thanks,
tough.
Grantland. Karma got those guys.
Yeah, it's Grantland's fault. Damn Grantland.
Damn you, Grantland.
Devin Carter, though, man. Devin Carter gone. Do you? I do think. I think he's an NBA player. I do think that. I think he's a guy off the bench. He's obviously not like a lottery or what was projected to be, but we'll see in Atlanta and maybe somewhere else. I think he's an NBA player. Ham, you think so?
I think he has NBA skills. I don't think he can fit in an NBA locker room, unfortunately. And so I'm going to say no, we're closer to the end of him being an actual NBA player than, maybe I'm wrong. But maybe a fresh start will help him. But whatever happened here, like I've told you guys this, like I've covered some really odd locker rooms, some sort of bad mixes of players here in Sacramento. Like the last couple of years, the locker room has been great and he can't fit into it. It's not that Devin Carter's like a horrible human being. It's not that he's the worst basketball player I've ever seen. But like if you can't fit in with a group of like super cool dudes, then you're going to have a difficult time fitting in anywhere. And so I kind of feel for him because, just personality wise, he just wasn't able to be part of what was happening on most nights. And that's really tough, especially like when you see guys come in that are on two-way contracts or guys that sign 10-day contracts and they immediately walk in and they just fit in. And then you see somebody else who doesn't, it's just tough because, they're all here to play a game. And just having somebody who can't figure out how to be part of a group is kind of awkward.
You think that's his personality?
Yes.
We heard we didn't hear the best things about him and his personality.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Like, again, players' kids sometimes work out that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all of them. I remember the first time I met Klay Thompson and I thought, that is an NBA player's son. And not in a really good way. Now he warmed up here and there and, he's an all-time legend and all that stuff. But personality wise, sometimes those guys who are former players' kids come across in a certain way. But then again, we have, Steph and Seth Curry, who are both like gems. You have all of the holidays. All three of the brothers are like some of the nicest human beings you're ever going to run into. And so I don't want to just put it as like a blanket that players' kids are usually, jerks. Because again, we have Domantas Sabonis here in Sacramento. Domantas Sabonis, like, sure, has there been, issues here and there with, coaches or whatever? Sure. But that happens all the time. As far as a human being, like Domantas Sabonis is a perfectly cool dude. He's always got some inside joke with every single person that's around the team, whether it's, one of his fellow teammates, or it's a locker room attendant, or it's, our friend Michelangelo in media relations. Like Domas has a running gag of some sort with everybody. He's a good dude. He fits in. He's not, he's an easy person to actually root for when you get to know him a little bit. He's always smiling. Same thing with Jonas Valanciunas. Like that dude looks like, if you put a hatchet in his hand, he's a villain in any horror film ever. And then you walk in the locker room and he walks around and he dabs up every single media member every single time he walks in and, puts a hand on you, like rubs your shoulder. How you doing today, buddy? Like just the nicest guy ever.
I'd be terrified.
Yeah. I mean, because that's a gigantic human being. So
like, Bob, you could get your foot off my shoulder.
So, yeah, I don't know. I just think that like it shouldn't be that difficult to get along in an NBA locker room, especially one on a team that didn't win that much. You should have been able to figure out your place and how you fit in because everybody else did. So,
And just to kind of reiterate what you've already said this before, like just now, and we talked about it before. Uh, Devin Carter might be a perfectly good human being. I actually think he is a good human being, a good person. He's not a bad person or anything. But what you're talking about, you could tell me, if I got it right, but just being able to work within the confines of a team. Maybe Devin Carter would be better as a golf player or a tennis player, as opposed to having to deal and work with 12 different individuals and come together as a team like that. Once again, if he's standoffish or would rather do things on his own, that doesn't make him a bad person. That just means he might not be the best teammate. And I think there is a difference between the two a lot of the times.
No, I totally agree. And I'm not saying that Devin Carter was just a bad teammate. Everyone hates him and I haven't heard that. It's just you can see when guys fit in and when guys don't. And so that would be more of the issue. It's just I don't, you look at again, how many pictures do we have? I pull these pictures up all the time because I'm looking to build my graphics on Locked On. How many pictures do we have of Precious with Neek and Max and Dylan all sitting there with sunglasses on, enjoying the beam, doing the whole beam celebration? Like there's a ton of them, and Devin just doesn't want to be part of it. And it's like, hey man, sometimes being too cool for school just it doesn't work. So yeah, I feel for him. I hope that he goes and he finds success somewhere else, and whether that's the NBA or if he ends up playing in Europe or whatever. I think he is very talented as a basketball player.
I mean, it's not like when the pick was made, it's not like it was trash. Like, oh, what are the Kings doing? It was like, no, Devin Carter's a good basketball player. This could wind up working out really well for Sacramento. He just really did wind up in a bad situation where he was hurt prior to the selection being made. The Kings desperately needed like his depth, and he wasn't available to play. And then, the season goes the way that it goes. Mike gets fired. He comes back, plays his first game with Doug Christie. Then the De'Aaron Fox things unfolds. Then Zach LaVine comes in. Then he comes back. He sucks. You got to send him down to the G League just so he can play basketball. And it was just a horrible, horrible position for him to be in. And you hope that it would get better the next year, and it didn't.
Yeah. I mean, you're always waiting for like something to work out with him. And very quickly you saw that he was falling behind, whether it was Killian Hayes or just Daquan Jeffries. Like there are all kinds of players that they bring in, and you're like very quickly he's getting a much different opportunity. And I think at the end of the day, that's where you can tell that the coaching staff and the front office, they were never on the same page with him, as opposed to like one of the front office being on one page and the coaching staff, everyone else seemed to be on the same page except for him. And again, I hope the best.
Sorry. From Chris Haynes. Do with this what you will. Due to a sizable distance apart in negotiations, Detroit Pistons restricted free agent Jalen Duren will meet with the Sacramento Kings at the start of free agency with the intention of structuring a sign and trade out of Detroit.
I'm going to tell you right now, Jalen Duren will be really good with Darius Acuff.
I'm going to tell you right now, Jalen Duren is going to be really good in Detroit.
Mark Spears.
Like, what is this? I mean, I love Chris Haynes. Like, everything says, like, it feels like these two are butting heads, and this is a.
Yeah, I thought about one thing though. Center for a center.
Yeah,
that's the first thing that came to my mind.
Can we throw Zach LaVine into this deal?
Oh, please.
Can we? You need a score. God damn it.
That's what they do.
Kenny, shut your mouth. You shut your mouth when you talk to us, Kenny.
But if it's not him, why are you going to get him? If it's not Domas.
No, I don't imagine. Yeah, no, I don't imagine that it probably is. Yeah. Again, from Chris Haynes, due to sizable distance apart in negotiations, Detroit Pistons restricted free agent center Jalen Duren will meet with the Sacramento Kings at the start of free agency with the intentions of structuring a sign and trade out of Detroit. Free agency starts 23 and a half hours from now. James, you now have more work to do, so go get that done. Keep us updated on what you find. We'll see you tomorrow morning with Jesse on the Jump.
Sounds good, guys.
Take
All
care,
right.
James.
Thanks, James.